Hello, CO150 and/or composition students. As you can see by our title, this video is going to cover figurative language, imagery, simile, and metaphor. Oh my. So before we start, maybe pause the video and ask yourself what you might think about these terms already, anything that you remember from a previous class, whether it's in college or high school, and just sort of get a sense, okay, where am I starting with this lesson? We're going to dive right in with an associative exercise. So, with each of the following images, also pause the video and ask yourself, what do I see literally in the picture, and what else could I see that is not the literal picture? All right, so pause and ask yourself, what is this literally, and what could it also look like? So when I look at this when I look at this image, I see some eyes here, kind of like an eyebrow, some eyes, maybe a nose-ish, and then a big smile. So we literally see tree bark, but we could also see a face. Do the same thing with this image. Pause and ask, what is the literal image, and what could the figurative image be? So while it's a factory, I'm looking at these two stacks here and how they remind me of jack-o'-lanterns, right? We got those eyes, sort of an interesting looking mouth. What about this image? What is the literal and what could be the figurative? So these are obviously some kind of shears for cutting, right? Pretty sharp blade. But a lot of people also see some kind of bird, right? You know, maybe this is the eye or this is the eye. And then we've got a nice beak, possibly an open, smiling beak. What about this one? This one's been a little bit harder for some students. So literally we have some rocks, but in terms of figuratively, I see one of these droopy dogs, right? So we've got the eyes, the nose, the mouth, big floppy ear, top of the head. What about this? Literal versus figurative. All right, so we've got a glacier, and then a lot of people see the Parthenon, right? Got some columns, or even if you just see columns, right? What about this one? What do we see here? Literally fire. Some people see kind of like a demonic child, right? Where if we've got the eye, the nose, this big smiling mouth, like hair. Some people also see a more cartoonish woman where this is the nose, this is the eye, there's like a chin, and like maybe this is a collar, right? This is sort of the chest area. So, you know, you could see multiple kind of figures in there. What about this one? What do we have here? This one has like several options, I kind of feel like. Some people see a dragon. I also kind of see a flamingo a little bit. And then I also kind of see like a really skinny rhino. So, right, you can kind of start to stretch the imagination a little bit there. Ooh, this is a fun one. What do we see here? Some grease in a tinfoil pan. But right here, I'm seeing a figure. And this is sort of a cultural reference, but I see, if you guys maybe have heard from a couple years ago, there was this fresco in Italy that I believe looked like this in the middle, and that maybe this one is sort of an AI approximation of what it looked like earlier. And there was this woman who took it upon herself, did not ask permission, did not tell anyone, and she just went in and was like, I'm going to touch up this fresco, and this is what it looked like by the end. So People call it monkey Jesus, and I tend to see monkey Jesus in this image. Now, ask yourself, what is the difference between imagery and figurative language? And it may help for me to give you the tip that one is more of a tool used to produce the other. So one is kind of the tool and one is more the product. They're related concepts in English literature. Figurative language is typically used to create imagery, which is a strong mental picture or sensation. If we focus on that word sensation, we think of senses. So in some way, one or more of the senses, touch, smell, etc., get activated. One example would be metaphor, the transfer of qualities from one thing to another as a kind of one-to-one equation. So for example, love is a blister in the sun, right? Love is the same, versus a simile, which is another type of metaphor, but using like or as. So love is like a blister in the sun. We're always making connections and comparisons, both visually and with language. It's a natural way for humans to understand the world, similarly to when a child looks at clouds and notices different shapes. Maybe you see a giraffe, maybe you see a turtle. Just a little side note, the name for that type of association is called pareidolia. So that's kind of a fun word that I like to share. Our language is often figurative, where our thinking is metaphoric, where our brain makes that jump from one thing to the next. You already know how to use figurative language. The trouble, however, especially in creative writing, is trying to move beyond the expected, the typical, the less creative language, looking for something fresh and new, something surprising, something that stimulates our imagination. Basically, we want to avoid cliches, a phrase or opinion that is overused and betrays a lack of original thought, right? So you're letting someone else do the work for you when you pull out this comparison. I'm about to list 6 of them, and if you pause the video after the 6th and think for a moment, you're probably going to be able to tell which 3 are cliche and which 3 are not. So it's hotter than hell. It's colder than ice. The heat wrapped itself around her like a down comforter, oppressive and heavy. Her skin was as white as snow. His mouth was as red as a bleeding wound. The cancer ate her like horse piss eats deep snow. And that's a real line, by the way. I took that from a poem. So pause and ask yourself, which 3 are cliches, which 3 are not? And if you guessed 1, 2, and 4 as being cliche, you would be correct. Now, do you recognize that comparison? Her skin was white as snow. Have you heard that before? You may recognize it from Snow White. Obviously, the differences between the Disney and Grimm's Brothers version are going to be a little more graphic, but we're going to use Snow White as an example here. But first, does anyone recognize this activity? Typically from childhood, but also, they can be fun now. It's called a Mad Lib, right? And you have this text, and there are different parts of speech, not included prompts where you get to plug things in, have some creativity and agency in the activity. So consider the following 3 Mad Libs. You should pause the video, and for each prompt, come up with as many similes as you can. I recommend 60 seconds. Don't spend too much time, but try to get a couple surprising options. So Snow White had skin as white as snow, we've determined. But what other things could be white? I'll give you one example: paper. Snow White had lips as red as. In the original, some people say cherries, some people say roses. In the Grimm's version, blood. So take another 60, brainstorm those. And the last one, hair as black as. Some people have said night. So take about 60 seconds and generate some additional adjectives there. And once you've finished, go ahead and post those to the Canvas assignment. I'm going to look at a couple specific examples, and we're going to talk about how different words create different reactions in audiences. All right, so Snow White had skin as white as porcelain, a ghost, the moon. Pause for a moment and ask yourself how these different adjectives make you feel. Right, so do they influence how you think about the character? With porcelain, you might be thinking delicate, precious. With a ghost, maybe someone who's sick or afraid. The moon, something romantic, something glowing, right? So even one word can carry so much weight to how your audience reacts. These exercises have helped us think about a term called slanted details. So pause the video and based on the previous exercises or activities, try to brainstorm a potential purpose or definition of a slanted detail. What does it do? Why use it? How does it help the audience with your writing? A slanted detail is a detail which contributes more than the literal description. If you think back to the beginning of this video, I was saying that, right, with the images, there's the literal image, what we see, and then there's the figurative, which is the associative image that we might be reminded of. It contributes to mood, to tone, and to a central concern, question, or idea. A central concern, question, or idea is essentially a sort of main idea, something that the author is thinking about what it means to be more than your story and relates to the human experience in general. The difference between mood and tone being the author's attitude toward their subject, mood being how the audience or reader feels as a result. Slanted details help the reader feel a particular feeling the writer wants them to feel. It can evoke strong reactions, both good and bad, from the audience. It can suggest or remind the reader of a larger idea of being human. Be sure to check Canvas for a couple of process work assignments based on figurative language. They're very short and just generative to sort of help you flex those muscles. And look for any other assignments for the upcoming weekend.